Percival the Frog. An Oxford Cottage inspired story vignette written by Leenie Brown and narrated by Christopher, a cloned voice made available by the voice actor through the Elevenlabs library. Author's note. In my novel Oxford Cottage, Darcy and Elizabeth are given a book of stories to which they can add their own before passing it down to the next generation of Darcys. This story is one of the stories they may have added to that book. Bennett Darcy scampered into the room with a trail of muddy little foot-shaped prints following close behind him, from Pemberley's front door to the sitting room where his mother was arranging to begin a search for her son who had once again escaped the nursery. "Mama, Mama, look at the frog, Mama." He shoved a muddy, wiggling creature under his mother's nose. "I found him near the pond. He was hard to catch." His 4-year-old face shone with triumph, while globs of mud dripped from his hands onto the floor. Elizabeth Darcy sighed. Bennett was as curious and troublesome as she had been when a girl. He was forever going on adventures and bringing home some treasure to her. "Marie," she said, "there appears to be no need for the search party. The young master has found us. Please instruct someone to draw a bath." Bennett's nursemaid Marie snapped her mouth closed and dipped a curtsy while saying, "Yes, ma'am," before leaving her employer's side. "Bennett, do not move." Elizabeth gave her son a stern stare. "Roger, a container with a lid, please. Perhaps the one near the fireplace." The footman scurried across the room to fetch a small lidded crock. Elizabeth pointed to the frog once Roger had rejoined them. "I believe Bennett's new friend would much rather be back at the pond with his family instead of in my house." Carefully, the footman placed the crock under Bennett's hands and the lid above. With a pout, Bennett released the frog and Roger secured the lid before the frog could make an escape. "Thank you, Master Bennett. I shall return your friend to his family where he can await your next visit." Roger smiled at Elizabeth and gave a bow while Elizabeth bit the side of her cheek to keep from smiling in return. "Roger," she called to him before he left the room, "could you please alert Mrs. Reynolds that my floors are unfortunately in need of some attention?" "Of course, ma'am." He stepped gingerly across the muddy trail as he exited the room with the crock held firmly in his hands. Then Elizabeth turned to her son. "It seems you have lost your shoes, my child. Are they still at the pond?" Bennett nodded his head. "And your socks, are they there as well?" Again, Bennett nodded his head. "And you found a friend at the pond?" Bennett's eyes sparkled and his head bounced up and down. Elizabeth drew a fortifying breath. She found it so very difficult to look into her son's eyes and remain stern when those eyes reminded her so much of her husband when he laughed. Perhaps she could just let him have his fun. Her eyebrows drew together as she looked at the mud that covered the floor and her son. No, it could not be avoided. She really must chide him for his thoughtlessness. "You have created a great deal of extra work for many people," she began. "There are servants who will now have to spend time washing a floor that has already been washed and drawing a bath that did not have to be drawn. Those buckets are not light, and it is a great number of steps to climb with the water to take it to the nursery." The sparkle was gone from her son's eyes in an instant, and his brow furrowed. It was another expression so like his father. Elizabeth's heart pinched. She knew he needed to learn to be responsible, but she would not allow that sparkle to be lost. How long had it taken her to get his father's eyes to sparkle in amusement? She placed her hands on her hips and scowled down at her son. "And then there are those who will have to attempt to get the mud out of your clothing and mine." "Your clothes are not muddy, Mamma," he protested. "Not yet," said Elizabeth. Then she scooped him up. "Now they are muddy. Did you think I would allow you to walk any further? That would have only created more work for the servants. A master must always treat those within his employ with kindness and respect. Creating unnecessary work is neither kind nor respectful." Bennett snuggled his face into his mother's neck and wrapped his muddy arms around her. "Sorry, Mamma. I'm not the person that needs to hear those words." Bennett looked up at his mother with a questioning look on his face. "It is not I who shall have to do all the extra work," she explained. "After we retrieve your shoes and socks, and you take a dip in the pond to remove some of this mud, we shall return to the house, and you will bathe. Then I shall come see you in the nursery, and we shall devise a plan to compensate the servants who have done extra work today due to your actions. Do you understand?" Bennett nodded his head against his mother's chest. "It was a fine frog, though," she kissed the top of his head. "There is a book in the library that has several drawings of frogs. Perhaps we could look at that later. And maybe you could draw me a picture of your friend?" A smile broke out across Bennet's face. "His name is Percival, but I call him Percy." Elizabeth chuckled as she carried her son out of the house, and he continued to relate to her the great effort that went into the capturing of Percy. Darcy watched from the door that attached his study to the sitting room. He never tired of watching his wife no matter what she was doing, but the way she had instructed his son about how to treat those in his employ without damaging his spirit was enchanting. Mrs. Reynolds approached him with a stack of towels in her hand. Darcy shrugged out of his coat and removed his waistcoat, which he exchanged with his housekeeper for the towels. "I've asked Sally to draw a bath for Mrs. Darcy. Will she be needing Sally's assistance, sir?" Mrs. Reynolds asked with a playful glint in her eye. Darcy smiled at the elderly woman, who was more mother to him than servant. "No, I think we can manage." She chuckled. "Good. It is about time Master Bennet had a sibling." Darcy bent and whispered in her ear, "If I am correct, he shall have one very soon, but since I have not been told, one must not shirk his duty." He chuckled at her gasp. "But for now, I'm off to meet Percival and offer to carry my young scamp of a son back to the house, so that his mother does not have to do it." And he hoped that the visit with the frog would not take too long, for he was rather looking forward to helping his wife remove the mud from her neck. Thank you for listening to Percival the Frog. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please help other readers find it by liking this video and sharing it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be notified when I upload another video. The 2023 copyright for Tales from Pemberley and other sweet story vignettes, in which Percival the Frog can be found, is held by Leenie Brown. All rights reserved. The narrator for this story has been Christopher, a cloned voice made available by the voice actor through the Elevenlabs library.